When I was 12 years old, my family moved to a new house in the countryside of Louisiana, located near a small village. We'd always lived in rural areas, definitely grew up unfamiliar with the city lifestyle or anything even remotely close to that. The property was 3 acres and very private. On the second night at the house, our dog Parker, who would sleep in my room, started barking and growling in the middle of the night. When he saw that I sat up in my bed, his tail started wagging, but he'd continue to bark and growl. I couldn't tell what he was looking at, though. He was just looking towards the corner of the room. I checked the closet and saw nothing, so I told Parker to shut up, and he did. But I did keep hearing him lift his head off his bed every once in a while, reacting to something. The next day, an older man came and knocked on the front door. My dad answered while I was in the living room watching cartoons. I heard the whole interaction. The old man introduced himself as Myron, the next door neighbor. My dad told me to come over and introduce myself, so I did. Myron seemed very kooky and aloof. Even my 12 years old self could realize that, but he seemed nice, I guess. The next day, I was in the backyard playing Pokemon on my Game Boy. My dad was in the front of the house mowing. The rest of my family wasn't home. Oddly enough, here was Myron wearing farmer's overalls, talking to me in his thick southern accent, asking what I was up to. He actually sat down at the table with me, which made me uncomfortable, especially considering he just walked into our backyard. Albeit there was no fence separating the front and backyard, but still. I told him I was playing Pokemon, and he knew what it was immediately, making Pikachu noises, trying to be funny, but it was just unsettling. I started to realize there really was something off about this guy. My dad came to the backyard with a lawn mower and then turned it off when he saw Myron sitting next to me. He approached us and said hello with a smile, but I could tell based on my dad's face and tone that he was slightly confused about what he was doing in our backyard. He never asked him that, but my dad told me I needed to go inside and wash the dishes. I knew he was trying to get me away from him. A few minutes later, my dad came in and asked me if Myron just walked into our yard, and I said yes. That's when he told me he didn't want me around that guy anymore and to let him know if I saw him again. It wasn't until a few nights later that I woke up to Parker growling and barking again. This time he was looking at the window. I got up to open the window just to hear if something was going on out there. Quickly after opening the window, without seeing anybody out there, I heard Myron imitating Pikachu noises again in his creepy old man's voice. I ran out of my room screaming, "Dad," repeatedly. When I told my dad Myron was outside my window, he stormed outside to check. But when he couldn't find him on the property, he went to Myron's house next door. But here's the twist, that Myron guy didn't live next door. An older woman answered the door and had no idea who he was. So, my dad went to every single neighboring house, and nobody had ever heard of a Myron. My dad called the police to report the man. The police said they would be on the lookout for him, and it even made the news. We never again saw or heard from Myron, or whatever his real name was. First of all, I'm a young woman, barely big enough to walk my dog. If this situation had escalated at all, I have no idea what would have happened. I'm not usually easily frightened, but this really scared me. It actually happened last night, and I have no idea if it'll happen again. It's just me and my giant dog in a nice private apartment attached to some townhouses, separated from the other buildings by a strip of woods. It's kind of like a tiny house that just shares a wall with the apartment building. As nice as it is, it's in a not-so-nice part of town, but I have a backyard and my own space with working electricity, so I love the place. It's my first time living on my own, and I won't lie, I've been a little freaked out about living alone, even with a big dog for security. Last night definitely didn't help. I was laying in bed, just browsing Reddit and trying to fall asleep, when I heard tapping on the window. My bedroom has 2 windows facing the backyard at ground level, about 3 meters from the tree line, with nothing but open grass outside. At first, since I'm not used to sleeping on the first floor, I thought it was a tree or something blowing against the outside of the house. Then I remembered, I'm on the first and only floor, with no trees close enough to reach the house. I started feeling a little nervous. I was a weird mix of both scared and annoyed that the tapping was keeping me awake. The noise had my dog's attention, but he wasn't barking yet, which to me meant it probably wasn't a person, so I wasn't as afraid as I could have been. Gradually, annoyance replaced the fear, and I decided I should tell whatever it was to knock it off. It had been nearly 30 minutes of this weird, uneven tapping, and it was almost midnight. I also had an early start in the morning. Best case scenario, there was no one outside and I was just talking to myself with no one there to hear me. Worst case scenario, there was someone outside, and my nonchalant attitude would catch them off guard, and they would leave. Right? Yeah, no. I figured if there was someone there, they'd expect fear, not conversation. So, I worked up some courage and said, "F off into the dark." The tapping continued for a couple more seconds. I repeated, a little louder this time, "Hey. F off, I'm trying to sleep." Then, the tapping stopped. After a second, I heard a male voice call back, "Sorry." The tapping didn't start again, but holy, I didn't expect someone to actually be there. I got out of bed and ran to the window with my phone in hand, ready to call the police. When I peeked through the blinds, I saw the guy with his hands up and the weirdest smile on his face. I quickly turned my phone's flashlight on and pointed it at my face so he couldn't see what I looked like. A few seconds later, I turned the light off, and he hadn't moved an inch, not even his face. He still had that weird and creepy smile and was staring at the window with his hands up, almost like he was posing for a photo. In hindsight, I don't know why I didn't take one. Finally, he turned around and started walking back through the woods and into what I assume was his own apartment right across from mine. What a way to meet the neighbors. I have no idea what possessed him to tap on my window for half an hour or what he had in mind, but he hasn't come back yet. I'm not sure what I'll do if he does. I didn't fall asleep last night, and I'm nervous about going to bed tonight, but I have class in the morning. Besides, I have a big, scary dog exactly for this reason. I should be fine. But still, what kind of person just knocks on a stranger's window at midnight? When I woke up this morning, I saw that the window pane on the outside had a few deep scrapes. I'm not sure if the guy made them, but I'm reporting it to management and maybe the police tomorrow. I bought my first house that I currently still live in 2 years ago. I was in the unpacking and settling in phase at the time. I was single and living alone, but I just figured it was time for a house. I had a couple of friends over to help me unload the truck full of boxes, and I paid them with food since they wouldn't accept money. They hung around for a few hours after just to hang out. When my friend Lorne went to the bathroom, he came back and said he heard some noises from inside the walls and that it sounded like there were some pipe issues. I took note of it, and the two of them left a little later. Since it was a Saturday, I stayed up pretty late on my laptop watching Netflix. However, I was hearing some light thumping sounds from above me, which was odd because my bedroom is upstairs. The only thing that could be above me would be the attic. Then I remembered Lauren's comments about the noises from inside the walls. I went to the attic door and pulled it down. I actually had to take a deep breath because I was a bit nervous. I climbed the stairs into the attic and pulled the light switch down. One very dim yellow light buzzed on, just barely lighting up the attic. The noises in the walls stopped, though, either that or the noises just weren't coming from the attic. I imagined with no boxes up there yet, it was just basically a big empty space, and I could clearly see no one was up there. The only things in the entire attic were a couple of giant framed paintings leaning on one of the walls. I went back down to my room and tried to get some sleep, but I heard the noises again. Now I started to fear there was a small animal in the walls, like a raccoon. The sound still seemed to be coming from directly above my room. It had to be in the attic, so once more I went up into the attic and looked to where I thought would be directly above my bedroom. The thing is, the attic didn't seem to extend the entire length of the house, so there's a wall covering where the section above my room should be. I walked over to the wall just to listen for potential noises. And I did hear noises from the other side of this wall. Then I looked at the two paintings leaning on the wall and how they were slightly angled. My heart started to race. I walked to the paintings and slightly angled one upwards off the wall, revealing a big hole in the wall. It took a few seconds for the reality to sink in as I held the painting at an upright position. The painting was suddenly pushed out of my grip to fall flat on the floor. I nearly had a heart attack. Out from the hole came the sickly-looking girl. She seemed to be high on something. She was shaking, making weird noises, and she would start this creepy laughing. She grabbed onto me and dug her nails into my shoulders so hard I screamed, and I pushed her as hard as I could off of me. She fell backwards into the secret room, and I ran to the exit and shut the attic door behind me. I locked myself in my room as I called the police and reported that a crazy, dangerous person was in my attic. Cops arrived within 5 minutes. 3 cop cars ended up pulling up, and there were a total of 5 police officers in my house. 4 of them went into the attic, and I heard the struggle. The girl screamed like a creature, and it sounded like she was trying to attack the officers, which led to her getting tossed. They finally managed to get her in cuffs and carry her out of the attic and outside to one of the cars. The girl had to be like anywhere from 25 to 30 years old, but like I said, she looked sickly. While the officers were still in the house, I went into the attic to examine the secret room. Inside was a pile of blankets, a dirty pillow, a lot of food wrappers, and human waste in one corner. It seemed as though this girl had been up there for a long time. It was truly a nightmare to discover this on my first night in my new house. The girl was taken to a nearby psychiatric center to get her the help she needed. We heard that the man died about a year after that. This happened about 2 years ago, when I was 19, and I had just moved out of student accommodation into an actual flat with my friend group of 6. The night we moved in, it was just me and one of the girls I'm close with, let's call her Lucy. I had my boyfriend over at the time, we'll call him Alec. The other people moving in were scheduled to move in 2 weeks later as they were all on various holidays or visiting home. So, it was just the 3 of us. Lucy was in her room, and Alec and I were smoking a joint in bed, watching kung fu movies. Then, I started to notice a man, at least 300 pounds and 6 foot tall, pacing outside of our window and looking in occasionally. We were on the basement floor at this time, but the windows were at ground level. Okay, that's weird, but we'll just make sure the windows are locked. 20 or so minutes passed, and everything seemed okay until Lucy ran into my room and said, "Babe, there's a man in the house." We must have left the door unlocked by accident. Now, I'm feeling chills. I'm like, what the hell do you mean there's a man in the house? Alec is frozen solid. Lucy and I go into the hall, and the huge man we saw looking in the windows is standing there in our hall. We ask, "What are you doing here?" And he pulls out his phone and shows us a text message from an unsaved number with our address written on it and something about people being inside. He told us that he was looking for his girlfriend and that she lives here. We're like, no the hell she does not, so please remove yourself from our house. He says, okay, and that he'll phone his girlfriend. He turns his phone to low volume and speaks to another man on the phone, who was clearly not his girlfriend. With more urgency this time, we tell him to get out of our house, and he says, okay. He finally leaves, and we lock the door. By this point, everyone is shaking. He's still on the phone with this man outside, and they're speaking a language we don't understand. But we can hear him getting angry. I tell Alec to please make the scary man go away, and he goes outside and tells him to shift away from our doorway as he's really scaring us. The man says, okay, and that his taxi is here. He walks up a dead-end street where no taxis were, though. We told our upstairs neighbors, who we had met earlier that day, about the whole ordeal. Let's call them Charlotte, Matt, and Rob. They informed us that the same man had tried to come in their house, insisting his girlfriend lived there. Charlotte already had a boyfriend, who we knew of and had also met that day, and Rob, who has more balls than all of us, threatened him with a knife the time he came into their house. He never bothered them again. Over the next couple weeks, the man would occasionally come back and look in our bedroom windows, and Alec was there most times. I'm really glad for that. I have no doubt he tried the door again, but it was always locked after that. My partner and I recently bought our first home. On the day of closing, the selling realtor informed us that the seller hadn't given her the keys to the house. She also claimed that the seller never had a garage door opener. When we asked about when we could obtain the keys, the selling realtor explained that the seller works an hour away and has long hours, so we couldn't get the keys until 9 or 10 p.m. Instead, the realtor arranged and paid for new locks on the front door and even gave us money to buy garage door openers. We closed on the house, and everything else went smoothly. However, when I went to set up and turn on the electricity, the company told me they couldn't turn on our power until the next day, even though I had called in the morning. The house needed a good cleaning, as the seller didn't bother to clean before moving out. Let me first describe the house layout. When you walk through the front door, it opens to the living area, with the kitchen to the left. Part of the kitchen is hidden from the front door due to stairs leading to the basement, so you can't see the oven or the fridge. The neighborhood is one of the safest in my area. I had to use the front door to move things in since the locks were installed before I arrived, so I didn't bother locking the door. Moving on with the story, since I didn't have electricity, I decided to start by cleaning the fridge. I turned on a true crime horror podcast and got to work. The fridge doors were wide open, and I was just doing my thing when a shadow appeared behind me. I knew this wasn't my partner because he was teaching, so I turned around to see a man in a black hoodie and black shorts. He told me he was there to drop off a garage door opener. He placed the opener on the island without saying another word. I probably spooked him just as much as he spooked me because he quickly ran out the door. It took me a while to compose myself and call my partner, hoping he was on break so I could tell him what just happened. I also texted our realtor about this strange interaction. I wondered if I hadn't heard a knock because I was so engrossed in my work. But I'm certain he didn't knock. I know this because less than an hour later, another man knocked on the door, explaining he was there to drop off a key to the front door. If he tried the doorbell, I didn't hear it because there wasn't any electricity. We're still working on the house before we officially move in, but now I'm ultra spooked about being alone in the house. I refuse to listen to a true crime horror podcast while the house is empty. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to watch the latest videos.